This is my big sister, Jacqueline Croker, or better known as Jackie, who was 18 and a half. Best friend, practical joker, idolised by hundreds. Anyone who she knew, she touched their lives. Greatly missed every day. She was my idol. I look at her in that. She was about 1.5, and it was taken in Butlins on a family holiday. This one was also Butlins. I think she was about 4. And her scruffy knees. She was always into mischief. Got me into more trouble than anything. This was her communion day. Mum was so proud. Mum actually made her dress and my dress. It was Mum's trade. She took great pleasure in making her clothes. Jacqueline was born 2 years after my mum and dad got married. 2 years after Jacqueline was born, my parents lost a child called Christopher. He died an hour after he was born. 3 years after that, my parents lost another child called Denise when she was 6.5 months old. She died of pneumonia. I was born 2 years after Denise, and her brother Alan was born 5 years later. So I was 12 when Jackie died. She was 7 years older than me, and we shared a bedroom. So we would put records on while she was getting dressed and ready to go out. Jackie loved listening to records. Dolly Parton, Johnny Logan, John Lennon, Diana Ross, any of them really, on her portable record player. Every Friday, Jackie would buy the Top of the Pops LP from Golden Discs out of her wages as a treat for us. Our bedroom was on the left of the landing, and her brother Alan's was on the right. We would have the record player playing on the landing, and we would go to bed listening to music. I remember we loved the Disney Christmas album. We'd play that most nights. The famous red record player. I still have it, refuse to part with it. Still works. The girls actually only were playing some of these records recently. She was in the athletics club, done the long jump and was quite good at it. Also done the shot put, but she was after placing, I think, second that day. I was so proud. That was in Santry. Jacqueline would have been about 5'11", so she was very tall. We were all tall, so she would have been head and shoulders above everyone else her age. And yet again, we're back in Butlins, and this one was taken at the Wishing Well in Butlins, and I think she would have been about 16. And I think it's one of the only serious photographs we ever have of her. Most photographs, she has her tongue sticking out. Jackie never took a serious photograph. Jackie always had a heart of gold and would have done anything for anyone. I remember Jackie would tell Mum, "Don't be so hard on Alison." Jackie was working in Roach's stores for a time. Jackie worked from when she was 15 years old to contribute to the house. Dad always got his wages on a Thursday, and he kept a separate wallet for my mum's house money, which would cover the shopping for the family on a Friday at Northside Shopping Centre and at Moore Street on a Saturday for our vegetables and meat. From this separate wallet came bus money for school for Alan and myself, subs for scouts. If my brother and I wanted to do any other activity, we would have to cycle or walk to school and save our bus money. Times were very hard financially for working class families, and Jackie's help was an immense importance and support to our family. She'd been eyeing up a pair of knee-high platform boots, which were expensive for the time, with the little money that she kept for herself from her wage packet. She saved up for 3 to 4 months to buy herself these boots. By the time she had got the money together and went to the shop to buy them, they were no longer available in her size. But instead, she took the money and dressed myself and my brother Alan from head to toe for a holiday in Batestown, where we would spend a week in a caravan. We have good memories from Batestown, from when Jackie was still here. I remember Mam once forgot the keys to the suitcase in the car, and Alan wanted to go swimming as soon as we arrived, so Jackie took him in his red shorts, Mickey Mouse t-shirt, brown leather sandals to the beach. Mam came over the sand dunes with the togs once she'd opened the case, only to see him already in the water, clothes and all, and Jackie chasing after him. Jackie bought my brother Alan's communion suit, which was to take place on the 26th of May that year, and my confirmation suit, which was to take place on the 4th of April, so Mam didn't have to worry about it. I remember what it was like being dressed in the confirmation suit my sister had bought me, even after she had died. My dad idolised Jackie. Dad and Jackie used to spend a lot of time together because they'd work together and even go drinking together. When my dad fell painting a boat in the dry docks in the January of 81, he had to have 186 stitches in his leg after a 35-foot fall. Jackie worked in the offices of the place where Dad worked, so was able to take the time off to go home for all his medical appointments. She was a great support to him during his time of vulnerability. Mammy relied on her so much in the house, and then when she started working with Dad, because they would go on the bus in the morning together, they would come home together on the way home if they'd missed one bus. Asher, we'd go in for a pint. Dad would go in for a pint and she'd have a bottle of Stag, and that'd lead to another and maybe another, and then it'd be, I suppose we better go home or Matt'll kill us, and they'd get on the bus and come home. But that's the sort they were. This was taken in Fairview Park. I remembered the day well. Mam giving out to her because she wouldn't wear the same top as myself and Mum. And the three of us sitting at the side of the playground in Fairview Park. Jackie was engaged to John Melia at Christmas, and John drove the ghost bus. Jackie was on the darts team for Shiver's Jam Factory. John's mum worked in the factory. This is the very last photograph we have of Jacqueline, and it was taken Christmas week in O'Connell Street when they'd just come out of the Happy Ring house after buying her engagement ring. They got engaged the week before Christmas, but she never told Mum, never told Dad. So it was funny because the ring was kept in her coat pocket. When she went out of the house, the ring went on. Before she came home, the ring came off. And this went on for 3 weeks. And she had literally just told Mam on the Monday before the Stardust that she had gotten engaged and she was going to get married. John was brilliant. I got on really well with John. He idolised her. The Stardust broke him, so he drove the ghost bus, so he had to go in and take the bus out in the mornings and go around and pick up all the drivers to bring them into the garage so they would be in to drive the buses at 6:20, and that's why he wasn't with her that night. They had been out, she'd played darts, and he went home because he was on the ghost bus, and she got a lift and was passing the Stardust, and the doors were still open at 12:10 and said to Pat Coffey, I'll go on, I'll go into they're all in there. Within 2 hours she was gone. So my dad had to get up early for work, so he heard the world news at 5:05. which reported that there'd been a fire in the Stardust. He went next door to see John and Bella McGregor, but Tracy wasn't home from the Stardust yet, though she had thankfully survived the fire. There were 16 houses on one side of our road alone, from which young people had been in the Stardust that night, if not more. The night of the Stardust, my mum and dad knew that she had worn a white coat out, but they didn't know what she was wearing underneath her coat. I was woken up at 7 o'clock by Mr. McGregor, asking me what other clothes Jackie had been wearing to try and identify her in the morgue. I remember when he woke me up, he told me that there was a fire. I felt disorientated and in shock, in horror and in disbelief. I remembered that we had no phone, so we had to go next door to Shirley, Tracy and Paul McGregor's house to use the phone. They were also in the Stardust that night. I remembered there being one photo of John telling my dad not to go into the morgue. My dad did go into the morgue, but Tommy Fuller and Vincent O'Shea. I remember also there was news footage taken of me in the neighbour's garden playing hopscotch at the time, not realising the severity of what had happened around us, because I was a child. My dad came home from the morgue and I was called into the neighbour's kitchen and told Jackie had died. I had to sleep in our neighbours, the O'Sheas, for the next 2 days. I think they were trying to shield me from what was happening, until the Monday evening when I was allowed to go home. I remember I was sat in the neighbour's garden when I saw Charlie Haughey come into the house with his staff, because he'd known my dad, who was a peace commissioner for Fianna Fáil. My dad was 6'4", 23 stone, and he picked Charlie up and put him out of the house. We were lucky that she was the second identified, if you can class any of us as lucky. Kay and Jimmy Dunn were my parents' friends and also my godparents. Jimmy rang to speak to my mum, who was too upset to take the phone, and asked me to take the message. They were persistent in asking to speak to Mum, but then had to give me the message that their son Liam had also died in intensive care from the Stardust fire. It's not as simple as just one person being lost to our family. Everyone knew everyone in our community, and each loss was felt by the community as well as the families. Living at home after the Stardust fire, you wouldn't have been able to get onto a bus without seeing someone with either visible scarring from a burn sustained that night at the Stardust, or someone known to you who had lost someone in the fire. Nobody ever spoke about it with each other in the community, because you would have no idea how the other person would react to something so emotional and affecting. It felt like everybody was left on their own, and so had to deal with the grief by putting it under the rug and just forcing yourself to carry on with life. On Tuesday, there were 4 coffins in our church. One was that of Julie MacDonald, who was my football coach. One was Caroline Carey, whom I knew from Irish dancing, and one was Michael Griffiths, whom I knew from Super Queen, and the other was our Jackie. I had to be taken out of the church and brought home and be sedated. I didn't get to go to the funeral because I was in such a horrendous state of upset at the sight of the coffins. The family was very affected by Jacqueline's death. My father, who was a gentle giant, who loved his children so much, and he was so wounded by losing her after the other 2 babies. I think that because he loved us so much, he was terrified of being hurt again if anything was to happen to myself or my brother. And I think this is why he pushed us away after that happened. He did rely on alcohol to help him to cope with the loss. But that was only to be expected. And it would lead to clashes between myself and my dad. We not only lost Jackie that night, we lost our relationship with Dad. Because, unlike so many other families, the family unit broke down because of the Stardust. Although we stayed together as a family, the days out weren't as frequent as they used to be. The holidays became harder. So, yeah, robbed would be the way I feel. My dad was diagnosed with cancer 16 years ago. He died in July and I got married within 18 months of the date. I refused to get married while my dad was alive because I thought we would have clashed on the day. But now that he's gone, I feel very guilty that I denied him the experience of walking his only living daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. My brother Alan never showed emotion over Jackie's death because he was only 7 when it happened. We all had to go through it again with him 2 years later to enable him to grieve for her. My brother Alan says that he remembers the after effects of losing Jackie better than he remembers Jackie herself. At the time of the Stardust, there was a Lord Mayor's Trust Fund from the people of Ireland set up for the families of the Stardust. They gave £18,000 to my mother only and made myself and my brother Alan sign non-disclosure agreements and all sorts of other forms. I was 14 and Alan was 9. We weren't allowed to go to the court. Mam built an extension on the back of the house, which is what Jacqueline always wanted, out of the money. Mam tried to run as normal a life for us all. Dad was a bit too afraid of getting too close to the memory of Jackie and losing her to allow himself to return properly to the way he was. He would wake up at 6:20 and get the bus at 7:20 for work. Have a few pints on the way home before arriving home at maybe 9, when he would just fall asleep in a chair. Mam never showed much emotion. She relied on me because my dad would be away at work and I was forced to grow up. Mam could not read nor write, so I would have to read the bills as they came in through the door. After Jackie's death, my mum and dad couldn't afford to keep me in school, so I had to work in the rag trade from when I was 15 to contribute to the household. I never got to complete my leaving cert. In my first job, I earned £50 a week and 40 of that went to my mum. My mum was robbed of her best friend when she lost Jackie. Mum didn't go out drinking and she wouldn't have even played bingo. So she in a way lived her life through her children. Mum was so close to Jackie. Myself and my mum have such a nice bond. And I know that Jackie would have had that too, if she were still here. These were some of her jewellery. These were honoured the night she died. Her red ring, her yellow ring, you can actually see the damage from the night of the fire. And this was her engagement ring, which I still have. Won't wear for fear of something happening it, but it still fits me. And then this is all we have left to remember her, other than our memories. Her headstone in Mount Jerome graveyard. It's changed a bit since, because Dad is now in with them. Mum has been living with me for the past 14 years and held me together when my daughter Heather was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. My mum would look after Shannon and Glenn while I was going to and from appointments with Heather during all this time. Every year at the anniversary, there will be a few pages in the Evening Herald paying respects to the Stardust victims. 7 years after it happened, my mum didn't put Jackie in the paper because she was trying so desperately to move on. We felt frowned upon after doing this, but holding on to this nightmare was too damaging for us all. 7 or 8 years later, I moved to England. This was really hard on Mum and Dad. I went to live in Blackpool, but came home that year for Christmas for 2 weeks and saw that they missed me. So I never went back. After going through so much trauma, when losing children in our family, us staying close together, it felt like the most important thing to protect. My kids were robbed of an aunt. My brother's girls were as well. We wouldn't have got a look in, and I imagine our kids saying to us, "I'm ringing Auntie Jackie on you." I can tell from watching my kids with their dad's family what it would have been like to see them with our Jackie. I know that Jackie would have been the first port of call, and she would have been the first on the phone on Christmas morning. My husband Mark has an uncle called Vincent. He used to work with Jackie. I was told that when I first met him, he was shocked and told Mark that seeing me was like seeing a ghost. He said it was like seeing Jackie all over again. This was almost 20 years after the Stardust. Even to this day, if I was to go out to Kilmore, where we used to live, and see some of the old neighbours, they would call me Jacqueline. And that comes across to me that she made such a big impact in the years that she was here, that here we are 43 years later and people still remember her. And that's the sort of person she was. I can't ever put what happened to the back of my mind, even if I want to. I still look at fire exits obsessively. I remember once being in a restaurant and walking out when I saw a table was blocking a fire exit. My kids have to let me know their plans if they change, and have to ring me from the friend's house when they arrive. They also have to keep their location turned on Snapchat. They say I stalk them. My sister Jackie just went out to play darts and then decided to go to the Stardust to see how Paula was doing with the rest of her friends, and she died. Mum sometimes has a bad day. She's almost 91 now, and I'd love to be able to bring some closure for her. For years, she was only ever a number. She was victim number 2. For years. And it was only in April last year, when I first read that pen portrait, that I felt like I gave her back her identity. And the process that we're going through now, yes, we're having to relive, and literally relive, every minuscule drop of what we went through 43 years ago. And having to hear all the witness statements, all of the professionals' insight into what happened. It's just making us have to relive it all over again, and it just means that here we are 43 years later, and it feels like it only happened 6 months ago. Because we've never been able to grieve them. Because we never got truth and we never got justice for them. And that's all we've ever wanted.